Hello, world. Welcome back to part 9 of the podcast monitoring app. Last time we finished up the task of creating the episodes, the validated dictionary for that, and we are getting ready to create the feed class that'll bundle together the metadata and the episodes. So it's going to be fairly simple, fairly straightforward. So if we have time at the end, go ahead and we'll complete the deliverable and bring it back into the main branch, because currently we are on a feature branch for this deliverable, creating the data classes. So let's just get started with that. We have here, so we're going to create this feed class here. And the feed class is essentially a wrapper for all the information that we're going to kind of be processing. So we have this filter, and what we're going to end up wanting to do is filter specific episodes. So what we're actually operating on are these episodes. Now, each podcast has many episodes, so there's going to be a list of episodes. And if we're going to be passing around this list of episodes, and we're dealing with multiple podcasts, we're probably going to want to be able to label it in some way. So we could throw it in a dictionary and label the throw it in a dictionary where the key is just the name of the podcast or something. But there's other information in the metadata that we might want. So instead of keying the dictionary with the entire metadata or creating just adding the information directly in the feed's going to contain the metadata for the podcast, the information about it, the name of the podcast, the type of podcast it is, the link to the feed. And then we're going to add into it a list of episodes, right? So that's the basic construction of this. So if we come over here, and if we look at the metadata real quick, right? So this was actually a dictionary. Now we can store it still in a dictionary, or we could store it in variables directly. As of now, we might as well just follow this pattern. If in the future, we're going to have to decide where various logic goes. And depending on where that goes, that could affect various changes of things. But for now, let's just keep it strictly all these kind of data classes as simply that. And then when we get to somewhere where we have to kind of decide where different logic goes, we can always kind of upgrade them to kind of more defined classes. So it's going to have a very kind of similar construct as this, and therefore the tests are going to be kind of fairly the same. So what I'm going to do is I already have the skeleton of this kind of built out here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this and replace it into the skeleton, and then we'll trim it down. So we'll say data here, and like we were saying, we have metadata, and then we have episodes. And then for now, we will just null these out to none. All right, so this here is going to be feed, and this here is going to be the data. And so this is that same exception function we've been using in the past. So the test create, we're going to create a feed, and we're going to use data. And then we have the copy function. So again, this is just feed and data. And in this case, we just say metadata here, and we'll have to fill this in. And then this is all going to be, so this is going to be the feed. So we're just kind of updating all these things to match metadata, and then none. So this is feed metadata, and then we'll fill this into in a second. Okay, so now we have like the things we're actually going to test exceptions for. So we have all these kind of key errors. So now we have, we're going to have a, covered the wrong thing. All right. So we want to make sure we have key errors for the metadata. And then a key error for the episodes. And so we can rename these to no metadata. We could rename this to no episodes. And then we can remove these ones. All right, so now I'm going to turn these into the ones for the right functions. Okay, so now we have type errors and value errors that we have to decide what they're going to be. So in this case, if we're talking about the metadata, right, so we're going to have to import, well, do we have to? No, so that's going to be done in there. So we don't have to import anything. So here we have the metadata, and so the type error would be if it's not metadata. So it can just be, I mean, it can be anything, but let's just create like a dictionary for it or something. So we'll say name, podcast name, and type name. So we have this, and it's a dictionary. It's not a metadata object, which is what we're going to be storing in there. So that should raise a type error. As far as the value error goes, well, as long as it's a metadata type, we don't really have to worry about the value error because it is like if it checks out that it is a metadata type, all the validation for that is already being done here. So if we have a metadata, then it is a valid metadata. Well, so I guess what we could say is, yeah, so if we have a metadata class, right, that's there, but it is invalid, right? So I guess that is where we could get a value error. So let's say we have stored a metadata class, and so we have a key, it is metadata. But then you go in and you change this, so this is invalid, right? The validation for the feed should verify that this is a valid feed metadata, and that would throw a value error, right, where this is not a valid feed metadata. So what we basically have to do is we have to create, so we'll have to, let's take this, put this in here. So basically what we'll have to do is we will have to create a feed metadata that is valid because it self-validates initially. And then we'll have to go and we'll have to invalidate it, right? So an example of an invalidated is just to delete the name of it. And then we'll pass that in. So that wouldn't throw a type error, but there is a value error in our feed because the metadata is invalid. So in that case, what we'll do is, so let's do this. Let's do metadata equals, and actually I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to copy the valid one we have here. So this we know is valid because we're using it for this test. So, and then we'll switch back and we'll have this here. So now we'll just pass this in. It's metadata, and that's a type error. But here, and so now we will need to import from feed metadata, import feed metadata. So here we're going to have the feed metadata, and we're going to pass it the metadata. So now that it's valid, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say self.data metadata delete name, right? So basically what we end up having here is a invalidated feed metadata right, that is stored within the feed class, and that should be a value error. Okay, so similarly, we're going to come down to the episodes. And let's just copy this in, I guess, for now. So we'll copy this over here. And now we're operating under the episodes class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to open up the episodes unit test, because this has some valid episode data. So here we have this episode data. So we'll copy this into here. And let's just try to, I'm just going to shorten some of the space here. So we need to import the datetime class to create a we need to import the datetime class here. So come over here and import the datetime. And then we're also going to need to, from episode import. So this is, by the way, a convention that I use personally where, so for this test, it's a feed test. So I'm testing this class. So I'm going to put it directly above the feed test. All the way at the top, I'm going to import Unittests because that's what this whole thing is doing. In between, the way I structure these is I have two groups, alphabetically, done alphabetically in each group. So this top group is general imports, things that I'm importing from either directly, like that I'm using from Python, like that are come with Python, like the datetime, or if I were to have to use pip to install a module, it would come from there too. So the after, then I have kind of things like the constructs I've created. So these are classes and files that I've created. So these are local things that are there. So that's kind of how I structure this. So here instead we have the episode data. We can get rid of the self here. And I'm just using it locally. You know what? I'm going to make sure I use this convention. So the metadata. Now let's just quickly replace these two. All right. So here we have, so we don't need this anymore. And now instead we have episodes, and that's this, and so that's just throw a type error, right? We don't have the proper class. So now here, I'm gonna replace it with this one, and instead we're gonna go episode. And actually this, right, well, so, okay, so what we want a list of episodes. So if it is a, so we have this and we're testing, we're verifying, okay, if it's not the right type, throws an error, right? What if it's partially the right type? So let's say we have a list here, and this then contains the episode, right? So this should also raise a type error. Because what we want, the valid one that we're going to want down here is, so similar to this, and we actually want to like create the real one, and this is going to be episode. What we actually want is a list of these episodes. And so this won't throw an error, right? So now we can do the value errors. And so obviously you could say that it's a value error if so it should be a list. So that's a type error. But then if inside the list are in episodes, that's a value error. But I'm going to say the type should be a list of episodes. And then so the value error is going to be similar to up here, where if we go when we invalidate an episode, that should be problematic. So let's say delete data episodes. This is a list, so we'll just grab the first one, And when we have an episode, we'll delete the title. So now it's invalid, and that should throw a value error, right? So now we're basically checking that, okay, everything is of the right type. It is a list of episodes. Otherwise, we'll get one of these errors here. And then we should basically say that if this is invalid, that we're validating all of the episodes. Now, in this case, we're just checking one of them, so, but I don't know that it's necessary to kind of go super, super in-depth with everything. So now, okay, so now what we're going to do is we need to do this test create with the real data, and then so we have to kind of fill this in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to actually do it in the setup. So I'm going to create it up here. And I'm going to say self.data. And that's structured fine. And I'm going to do the same thing with the metadata. Add it in up here. And then in here, what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to create a copy of it. That way, if I'm using and altering these, it won't. If I'm using these, like nothing will kind of, like these are kind of delinked. Now these. Yeah, so then now I have this, I have to come back down here, and I basically have to add self in front of all of these so that they're correct. So those are all good. The copy shouldn't really be necessary in this case, but I'm just going to leave it there. And so we have all that. So now if we come in here, so this metadata should be a different metadata. So in this case, because I actually did the copy, so I can actually change. Okay, so now if the data is copied, right, then it won't change. So we have so if we basically alter this metadata, now this is the dictionary. So if we alter this one, right, we already know from the test, the metadata class test, that if we alter this here, it won't actually affect this metadata. Or sorry, so if we alter this here, this d.metadata, so we actually have to wrap these properly. Okay, so let me make sure I do that. All right, so this is actually going to be, and I just noticed I got these incorrect in order. So let me alter these a little bit. All right, so we have here, we actually have to put this in feed metadata. It's not defined. And then here we're going to wrap this in episode. Why does that one say it's not defined? Oh, I think I used, no, I didn't do that. Oh, the D. Capitalize that. All right, so now, okay, so let's say we were to alter the metadata, right? So if we alter this metadata, we already know by the unit test that we have for metadata that altering this here won't affect this metadata, right? So we don't have to worry about that being something that is copied. So now what about the next level up, right? So if we were to, so if we're passing in the D data, right? So if we were to go into and change this dictionary, so we come in here and we say metadata equals, so we already know that if we say self.d metadata name equals new podcast name. So we already know if we do that, that's not going to affect this. But what if we then create a new metadata and we pass it in the self dot d metadata. I'm going to remove these copies because there's already a copy that's done inside, so we don't need to copy this again. Because so we had this metadata, we create a feed metadata, and we set it there. So is this feed metadata that's in the feed should not be equal to this one, right? It should be equal to this one. And so cert not equal self dot. Well, do we even need to? All right, this is what we'll say. We'll say well, let's just check the name because that's the thing we changed. So if we go feed metadata name, that is equal to podcast name. I think, let me just check. I think that's what I did on the, yeah. So all right, yeah, that works. That's good. All right. So now, we could do the same thing, right? So we could sit here and we could say, all right, let's change the episodes, right? Or change an episode and verify it's the same. But honestly, I don't want to like make this test ridiculously long and cumbersome. So I'm just going to leave it like that. I think that's perfectly fine. All right, so this should properly, so let's check the log real quick. All right. So we're saying git commit, and we're going to do basically the same thing where we said git commit. I'm going to do the same broken created all feed UTs. All right, great. So now if we run them, Python feed, we get 4 failures and 1 error. The errors, so we look at the error, feed object is not subscribable, right? And that makes sense because we did not def get item self item pass. Let's see if that actually, no. Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's now fill this out with the information. So I'm going to close out that one, and basically, and we can close out that one too. So let's grab the episode one. And so these are going to be the same. Let's just replace these, right? So we're still copying the data and calling the validation function, and then we're returning from an item. So let's see, run it now. Now we got rid of that error because we got rid of all those kind of things. And now we just have 4 failures. So we're passing the create and the copy because we have implemented those. And now we have 4 failures, which are all of these. So now we have to make sure we throw key errors for metadata and episode. So similarly, right, we can do that simply by just trying to access it. So we'll come in here and we'll add a couple of these in, and we'll say metadata and L episodes. And what? Oh, we gotta get rid of this. All right, and so that should hopefully pass 2 of them. Great. So now we just have 2 left, and that's just these type errors. And so let's start with this one, the metadata one. So right now we're on the metadata. We're failing on line 47 here, which is the type error. So we want to raise a type error for metadata not being a feed metadata, right? So again, I'm just going to kind of copy this. So now we're going to have to make sure we import the type. So we'll say metadata is not feed metadata. And so let's go ahead and add the proper imports. So we're going to import both of these because we're checking their types. All right, and so feed metadata raise error, and we'll say metadata is whatever type, but should be. And so let's check this out real quick. So if we go Python from feed metadata import feed metadata. No, again, capitalizations. Okay, so f equals feed metadata. All right, I'm just gonna copy and paste it. Take this right in there. It's not, again, capitalizations. All right, great. So now what is the type? So that's this. It's this class here. Great. So now we'll just come in. So we have 2 options. I mean, I could have just said, right, I could have like created a fake one or whatever, and I could have basically done that in here, but let's just add this in like this. I'm gonna put that on the one line. It goes off screen, but I'm also super zoomed in, so let's exit out. All right, so now if we run it, we get that type error. So now off of the metadata, we now fail on line 50. Line 50 is a value error for metadata being incorrect. So what we basically have to do is we basically have to say, so let's come back over here to here to where like value errors are. So grab this real quick. All right, so raise a value error. Metadata should be valid. And so basically all we have to do here, because we already have that function, is we just say, well, honestly, let's not even do that, because like, so we have 2 options, right? So if we're calling the feed metadata, right? And so this is going to, if invalid, throw an error. So we have 2 options. We could catch that error and then rethrow an error, but this is what's failing. And so what we really want to do is we want to fail there. And so all we actually want to do is say metadata dot. So we know it's a feed metadata. So we just want to call metadata dot validate. And so this, if it's incorrect, will throw an error. Does not. type error. Feed metadata object does not support item deletion. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Because it's not actually a dictionary, so I can't actually delete it. So what I'm going to have to do is, I can't do the key error. And this is also not going to be a value error anyway. So what I have to do is, I can't do the deletion, but I can fail on a value error there, which makes sense. So then it'll still kind of hold true. So let's do this. Come over, right? So where do we get a value error from? Basically this. All right, so we have this, or if type is other. So let's do this one. This one's kind of nice. So we'll come in here, and basically, right, we have the metadata, and this is going to be the URL. So we'll come in and replace this, and remove that, and oh, oops, let's get rid of that. Accidentally committed something. There we go. All right. Does not support item assignment. I mean, it should. Oh, okay. Well, so that's actually good to know. So we can't. So wait, what did we do in here? Oh, but it does support item assignment, does it not? Because we're doing it here. And so we have a feed metadata object that we created here, and that's the metadata. Oh. Okay, well, I guess that's good to know. We can't alter it, right? So we can't actually come in. So I guess the only way to do this would actually be go directly to the data. So if we came in here and we did something where we said, this is metadata. So we said self.ddata, and then we did name, and then we can do the deletion. So that's the only way to actually change this, right? We can't access it directly through there. So you'd have to actually come into this data and change it, which obviously you really shouldn't be doing. And the other things will actually catch it. So that's actually kind of good to know. So let's run this now. Now what do we get? Key error name. Was that not what we... Metadata. Metadata has a name. Metadata, data, name. Key error name, get item. Oh, no, okay, that's what we want. So why, so like that, this is the error that we want. So we're calling the validate. Why are we not catching it, though? So line 24, verify exception raised. And then we have the init, the validate, metadata validate, name, get out, key error name. Okay, so it's throwing this error. Interesting. So we're getting the error that we want, right? Because we're creating, so what are we doing here? We're coming here, we're creating this feed metadata, and then we're coming in and we are invalidating Oh, I think it's because I think we're gonna have to come up with another kind of helper, because here we're passing that in. All right, so that's interesting. So let's see what we have here. Git diff. We're gonna probably call it for this, and then next time we'll come in and we'll clean up these tests. All right, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna temporarily remove this validate, and I'm going to, what do we do with the unit test? All right, so I'm just gonna commit. So here, let me run this real quick again. So we get the 2 failures, and we're failing on both those tests, but we're passing now all the other tests. So we'll say git log 1 line, it's 5, git status, git add feed, git commit -m, broken, and fixed, creation, and key error UTs. And now I'm gonna add this back in. Great. All right. Cool. Git status. Git diff. All right. So basically, all right. So we got most of those done. Next time, we're gonna have to come in here, and we're going to have to basically work on these and see what we want, right? So we know we can't alter them in certain ways. So the question is, in what way can you alter the data? And if the answer is no ways, now we know it seems like there is a way here, but we might be doing this incorrectly. So we'll have to go over this and figure out what we want to do. So yeah, with that, we'll wait till next time to do that. And so until then, see you.